Today, we're diving into some core principles for how to get through life's biggest uncertainties. Now, this isn't about pretending challenges don't exist. It's about how we can face them with faith. Think of this as a guide for finding your way when the path ahead just isn't clear at all.
You know that feeling, right? Where you feel like you're moving, but you honestly have no idea where you're going. You can't even see the next step. It's disorienting, and if we're being honest, it can be pretty scary.
So, what if you had a map for those exact moments? I'm not talking about a map that shows every single twist and turn, but one that gives you principles to guide you, something to keep you centered and moving in the right direction, especially when you can't see the big picture.
All right, so let's start right there with that fundamental feeling of uncertainty. Because it's in these tough moments that we're faced with a really critical choice, one that basically sets the direction for our entire journey.
When it comes down to it, we really have two options. We can let our anxieties and all the what-ifs take over, letting fear call the shots. Or we can choose a different guide entirely. We can let faith lead the way, trusting that there's a purpose even when we can't see it for ourselves.
So, what's the antidote to that overwhelming feeling of uncertainty? Well, it all boils down to one single foundational idea: trusting that there is a grand plan.
And this right here is the absolute heart of it. See, trust isn't about having all the answers. Actually, it's the exact opposite. It's about making an active choice to believe a perfect plan is unfolding, especially when nothing makes sense from where we're standing.
This really drives home that idea of purpose. It pushes back against that thought that life is just, a chaotic mess of random events. Instead, it suggests that every single piece of your story, the good and the bad, is being woven into a much larger intentional design. So here's the bottom line. Trusting the plan means you have to trust the planner. It's about letting go of that need to control every little outcome, and instead, choosing to rely on a wisdom that's so much greater than our own. Okay, so if we're going to trust the plan, where do we get the strength to actually walk the path? Especially when it gets really hard. Let's talk about how we can tap into a much deeper source of resilience.
We often think of strength as being invincible, like never feeling weak. But what if that's the wrong way to look at it? Maybe true strength isn't about never stumbling. Maybe it's the resilience you find through faith at the exact moment you feel like you have absolutely nothing left in the tank.
And here's the beautiful part. Those moments where you feel weak, they aren't a sign that you're failing. They're actually an invitation. They're an opportunity to stop relying on your own limited power and to start drawing from a divine source of strength that never, ever runs out. And that strength, it's also found in knowing you're not alone. That feeling of being totally isolated can be crushing, but this is a promise that even in your loneliest moments, there is a constant presence walking with you every single step of the way. All right, so let's get practical. How do we actually do this? How do we cultivate this faith and resilience in our day-to-day lives? This next part is all about turning these big ideas into real, concrete actions.
So here are 3 key actions for your journey. First up, prayer. It's about keeping that conversation going, knowing that it can genuinely change everything. Second, we have to actively hold on to hope, trusting that no matter how dark it gets, a light will always, always shine through. And third, persevere. That means consciously making the choice to leave the past behind, because there's something so much better waiting for you up ahead. And after taking these actions, we land on the ultimate assurance, the unfailing promise. This is really the bedrock that everything else we've talked about is built on. Look, we all know it's true. People and situations, they can let us down. It's just a part of life. But faith is all about anchoring ourselves to something that is completely, totally steadfast. A promise that will never, ever be broken.
So when you hit that wall and you feel like you just can't go on, remember this promise. God is your strength. It's a source of power that shows up right when we need it most. It's a call to stay faithful, not just in the huge, life-altering moments, but in all the small, everyday moments of hope and doubt too.
Because this is the core promise that holds it all together. It's the one constant in a world that is always changing.
And so it calls us to just keep believing, keep moving forward, even when it's hard, and especially when it feels completely impossible. And here's one final piece of wisdom for the road. So much of our stress comes from wanting things to happen on our schedule, right? But a huge part of this journey is learning to trust not just the plan, but the timing of the plan. And that
Well, that requires patience. It requires waiting with a real, active, expectant faith.
So, after all of this, the real question isn't just about understanding these ideas, it's about what you're going to do with them. It could be something small, or it could be a giant leap. So I'll just leave you with this. What does your next step of faith look like?